the former British ambassador to Russia, Sir Andrew Wood. Hello to you, Sir Andrew. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. What will the Russian people be hearing about what's happening in Ukraine, do you think?
I think a large proportion of the Russian people will suspect that it's true, but all sorts of emotional forces will be making them very, very anxious to deny it. They had great trust in the armed forces, greater trust in them than the government in general. And this is such a terrible shock for them too, I believe.
The UN Security Council is meeting. Russia wants it to meet in emergency session, probably around about 3 o'clock this afternoon. What do you think that Russia will say to the UN Security Council?
Well, I think you know as well as I do, there will be vigorous deniers. It's not them. They never did anything like that. They never would. It must be the Ukrainians, or if not the Ukrainians, possibly the Americans, or anything. I think in slight defense of the Russians, one has to remember that this is a war in which a lot of civilians are taking part. It's also a war which, in the area of which the Russians have been losing, some of them are probably rather frightened, and their reactions are accordingly wicked, but emotionally perhaps understandable.
We know that the Ukrainian president is hoping to speak to the UN Security Council later on today, but we're also being told that potentially there could be face-to-face talks between him and President Putin. From your experience, do you think that could happen? And if so, what could be hoped for, expected from that?
I don't think it will happen, and I wouldn't trust Putin a single word that he would utter in that case. The trouble is that the war has not reached a position where it is decisive. It has been a shock for the Russians to reveal themselves as being so inept militarily, and the fierceness of the Ukrainian resolution. It's also a complete contrast to what they not only expected, but relied on. It wasn't just the speed of their victory, they supposed, but also that it would be possible thereafter for them, in effect, to rule Ukraine, which it evidently now is not. This war is going to go on.
Until when?
Until Russia loses or Ukraine loses.
There is no point where you think Russia will strategically withdraw?
From the whole of Ukraine? I think that's unlikely. It should happen. It would be the interests of the Russian people that it did happen. Even if Putin won and dominated the entire country, or the eastern part of it, or whatever it is, he would not now be able to secure the support of Ukrainian people, whom he's described as the same people as the Russian people. This is absolutely unforgivable, and people do not forget such things.
You, of course, having been an ambassador for the Court of St. James in Russia, know about Russian politics very well. Which countries do you think that the President Putin can still rely on? It does look as though, China is very much sitting on the fence, India, Pakistan, Brazil. How much will he continue to rely on those countries, do you think?
Well, I think he will rely on a degree of difference between other countries which are opposed to him. I think we are also in a difficult position in that we, the West in general, and NATO in particular, would like a peaceful outcome, of course. But we can't negotiate on behalf of the Ukrainians. It's up to them to decide what is possible and what should be achieved in any negotiations. Zelensky has said already that they will make no territorial concessions, or at least not immediately. But one just doesn't know. I think it does depend now on what happens in the eastern half of Ukraine, to what degree the Russians are going to try to create a land continuity between Donbass and Crimea and eventually Odessa. So that there's a lot to wonder about, but not that much you can actually make a prediction for. I think the Russians are in an impossible position.
Sure.
And I believe that far more people in Russia sympathize with the Ukrainians than is admitted in or reflected in the public polls and things like that.
Okay. We know that the eastern region is where Russian troops are focusing their firepower at the moment, but we also know that President Putin congratulated the Hungarian leader who was re-elected yesterday. How much concern might there be about what could happen from the West?
Well, I think there are questions as to how the cohesion in the West will be maintained. Hungary is a particular example of something not in line with the rest of the EU. But it's obvious that there's far more concern and I think understanding in the eastern parts of the EU than there is in the central parts. I think we all have a dilemma. We would like this to stop, but we would like it to stop in such a way that it is not renewed. And the idea that, for example, there should be some agreement that the Russians would have control over Donbass and Crimea would just be a means of providing a way in which the whole thing will be renewed at a later date. I don't think the Russians will want to carry on fighting forever, but nor do they want a peace which deprives them of what they've already got. Putin himself is in a rather central position, yes, but also a rather isolated position in that he doesn't have any machines which provide him with adequate discussion with his military or other people about what the possibilities may be. And he's also in a position where he's politically rather desperate. He cannot afford a defeat.
So, Andrew, thank you very much indeed for your expertise. We always appreciate you joining us on the programme. So thank you for taking the time this Tuesday morning.